Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, Your Excellency, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Hailemariam Desalegn, all our wonderful guests across the world, ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct pleasure and a very high privilege for me to welcome you all to the Africa Green Revolution Forum 2021 Summit. And let me say, Karibuni Kenya, although virtual, it is wonderful to have you all with us. Your Excellencies, permit me to commence my remarks by extending my gratitude to all of you for joining us today as we convene under the auspices of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa to reflect on the bold steps that our respective governments are taking to transform our respective food systems. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, I want to thank you for honoring Kenya by granting us the privilege of hosting once again the Africa Green Revolution Forum Summit. This 2021 summit offers an opportune moment for all our nations to put our thoughts together, accelerate action, and make commitments to deliver resilient food systems for our continent and our people. We convene amidst a disruption that has caused untold grief and strain to the lives and livelihoods of millions in our countries, across the continent, and globally. No aspect or sector of social economic life has been spared. The enormous pressure on our food systems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects has exposed the vulnerabilities of our food systems and reversed hard-earned gains that we had secured earlier. Just as an example, two of the greatest drivers of agriculture are the manufacturing sector and the hospitality sector. Travel restrictions have severely constrained the hospitality sector, which has in turn led to subdued uptake of agricultural produce that causes massive losses to farmers. In light of the realities that we are confronted with, now more than ever, the call to accelerate action and make increased commitments to deliver resilient food systems is urgent. Therefore, at this year's forum, we must identify immediate actions and steps that are required to accelerate progress and recovery towards inclusive agricultural transformation. As we head into the United Nations Food System Summit, as Amina has just told us, let us use this summit to cement a single coordinated African position that will be placed before the United Nations Food System Summit. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on our part, my administration remains committed to the food system transformation agenda. We are remodeling Kenya's food systems into one that exploits the vibrant energy of our youth, thereby making it more inclusive, innovative, collaborative, as well as dynamic. Equally important to note is that our renewed drive anchors our food systems transformation agenda on data-based decisions. Armed with the relevant and precise data, we are better able to make targeted interventions that address water scarcity, climate change, land pressure, and the competition between subsistence food crops and export cash crops. The United Nations Food Systems has given us a platform to reflect and to rethink our strategies of making our food systems more resilient and sustainable. Kenya has been fully engaged in this process. Our national and subnational dialogues throughout the country have driven the identification of the actions needed to achieve the food security pillar of our nation's Big Four agenda. These all-inclusive and comprehensive discussions were undertaken at all levels of our nation, from the grassroots at the village and the local level, all the way to the national level. 4 critical pathways and priorities for Kenya's food systems were identified, and these actions are youth, digital innovation, diverse diets, and climate change. Specifically, we aspire to increase the number of young people receiving school-based agricultural education, increasing the uptake of digital agricultural solutions, improving the diversity of diets, including fresh fruit, vegetables, dairy, meat, fish, as well as grains, and lastly, to heighten climate action to build resilience of our agriculture and food systems generally. Further, the agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy that my administration is currently reforming the sector by increasing output and productivity, boosting incomes in agribusiness, and ensuring household resilience and food security. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I call upon each one of us, both state and non-state actors, to use this Africa Green Revolution Forum to make commitments towards transforming our food systems. On our part, Kenya is making tremendous efforts to foster the realization of this shared aspiration among all nations of the world. As we all undoubtedly appreciate, our youth and our children have been raised with the perception that agriculture is an antiquated and perhaps even an unworthy occupation. Rather than venturing into spaces within the agricultural sector, they would prefer white-collar occupations, particularly those in traditional prestige professions or in the emerging areas of digital content and ICT. In order to overcome these negative perceptions and to show our children and youth the nobility as well as the profitability of agriculture, we are elevating the place of agriculture in our schools by revitalizing the 4K clubs. We are doing this because Kenya's 31,218 primary schools and their enrollment of close to 10 million school-going children offers a vast network through which knowledge about food and nutrition security can be boosted. The revitalized 4K clubs will provide a holistic approach to positive youth development at home, school, and also within the community by building on the strength of the youth as active agents of community development. Through these clubs, the values of patriotism, volunteerism, and the dignity of agriculture will be inculcated in our children during their early formative years. Further, as a leader in school meals programs since the 1980s, Kenya is also taking an active role in the UN Food Systems Summit School Meals Coalition. Worldwide today, 388 million school children have been receiving school meals since the pandemic struck. Together with our partners, including the World Food Programme and the African Union, we will work to find sustainable and innovating funding sources for schools, feeding programs, and with the multiple stakeholders to achieve better outcomes for school children globally. So, Your Excellencies, as I conclude, I want to invite this summit to ponder our current crisis and to ponder so boldly, frankly, and with a spirit of hope in the possibilities that we can make a reality. Let us reflect on the words of President J.F. Kennedy, who once famously said, and I quote, "The war against hunger is truly mankind's war of liberation," end of quote. We have an opportunity to fundamentally recast the position of food and nutrition security in our countries, in the continent, and globally. If we have the will, I believe we can find the way. With these remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I want to have the great pleasure of declaring the African Green Revolution Forum 2021 Summit officially opened And I wish each and every one of us very fruitful deliberations. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for setting the stage, and thank you for agreeing to be part of the presidential summit that's going to happen in a couple of minutes' time, along with your fellow presidents, heads of state from Rwanda, Uganda, Djibouti, Namibia, the Vice President of Tanzania also online, and also Malawi as well. Thank you for your time, Mr. President. Once again, round of applause for the host president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. On to the summit, folks. Let's not waste time. To moderate this summit, please welcome Dr. Vera Songwe. Now, she is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and the 9th Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, the ECA.
My sister Agnes, I'm going to follow you and say all protocols observed, but I must recognize His Excellencies, the heads of states, and of course, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina Mohammed. My role today is to ask the leaders what they're going to do to ensure that the Food System Summit is successful. But before I start, maybe just to have a little bit of context, and yes, with a little bit of think tanking in its wake. We're nearing the end of 2021. This leaves us with only 8 more years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The decisions you make as leaders today is going to determine whether we meet those goals and how close we get to them if we don't meet them as a continent. It is going to decide whether every man, woman, and child on the continent is going to live in a prosperous Africa in 2030 or not. But before we do that, we have COVID-19, as President Kenyatta has just emphasized. It has challenged us, it has stretched our imagination, it has stretched our resilience, but it has also proven that Africa can rise to its challenge. A lot of the hard-won gains that we had in the last decade are at risk of disappearing, but we have kept the fight alive. Today, when we look at the numbers, we've had about 7.9 million Africans who have had COVID. About over 200,000 of them have unfortunately been hospitalized, and we have lost an equivalent number. Those are large numbers who are affecting our rural communities and our food systems. And so as we talk about food systems, of course, we must talk about COVID. The rest of the world is at about 55% vaccinated. Africa is still sadly at 4.8%. We cannot have effective food systems if we do not vaccinate and if we don't get the COVID-19 fight under our belt. Yet, collectively, we have learned as we fought COVID-19 that as Africa speaks as one, if Africa speaks as one, we can win that battle. And I think President Uhuru Kenyatta, President Kagame, we have always said that, and we will continue to do that. We must think about agriculture and food in a different way as we speak. I urge your excellencies to think about what we must change, learning from the past, learning from the COVID-19 crisis, from how Africa and Africa's leadership have acted, and how the rest of the world has responded to Africa. We must react differently to the rest of the world and to ourselves. We have a tremendous opportunity here in the AGRF and the UN Food System Summit in the next 2 weeks' time to chart a new pathway. And Dr. Agnes Kalibata, hands on the ground, understands the challenges, but clearly has success under her belt, and she can bring it to this conversation on how we can build resilient food systems over the next few years that will be critical for driving a sustainable Africa by 2030. A sustainable Africa by 2030 is a lofty goal. If we put it in numbers, 250 million Africans tonight will go to bed hungry. That is the conversation that we are having here as well. The studies that the ECA has done with the FAO and the AGRF shows that this 250 million Africans who go to bed hungry are mostly women and kids. So this conversation is also about them and how we bring them into a prosperous Africa. As leaders, I will ask you a first question on various aspects related to building resilient food systems. I will ask all your excellencies a second question that will be the same, namely, what are your priorities going into the UN Food System Summit in 2 weeks? Now, let me turn my first question to President Kenyatta. And thank you for hosting the summit. You have been a leader on these issues, and we thank you for hosting again the summit here in Kenya. Your Excellency, Kenya has taken the issue of food security and food systems seriously. In fact, it is part of your big four, as you have just laid out And we've already seen some of the successes that you have begun to see and realize. Congratulations. How is Kenya progressing towards achieving your aspirations under the food and nutrition security pillar in more detail?
Thank you very much, Vera, for that. And let me say that since 2013, my government has been very focused on trying to ensure that 100% food and nutrition security is actually attained. And we've put in place various measures, including programs for food and crop diversification. We have an e-voucher program that supports staple crop farming, and as well as farmers in the livestock and dairy value chain as well. We've also put in place programs that encourage the growth of indigenous food crops, such as sorghum, millet, and cassava. And we're also encouraging people to embrace the growth and consumption of indigenous vegetables, another more nutritious other than conventional vegetables. And this, I believe, is very critical, especially for all those of us in arid and semi-arid areas. We've also been moving towards flour blending and flour fortification policies that are encouraging millers to blend staple maize flour with either cassava, millet, and beans and other type of crops as well. And I believe that all of this will not only help in commercializing such crops, but will also bolster our efforts towards our nutrition outcomes as well. And in this, we're working both as a national government together with our county governments to develop elaborate training systems as well, and to also have a good number of extension workers who are out there on nutrition-sensitive agriculture. And we're also looking, as I said in my speech earlier, at having more youth participation in the provision of both digital extension work, advisory services, but also engage in agriculture directly themselves. During this COVID-19 period, especially at the height of lockdown, we also started looking into other areas. And one of the programs that we started was the distribution of materials to start 1 million kitchen gardens across especially our urban areas that were hardest hit during the lockdown process. And this is something that we're also continuing to focus ourselves on, to also ensure that the urban working people are also able to be food secure in their respective areas. And this is a program that we're also looking at. We're also putting in place programs that will ensure that loss also occasioned by weather or disease-related shocks, we're also able to insure our farmers so that they are able to overcome the risks that sometimes occur as a result of unexpected shocks, either weather or disease related. And we're trying to move towards de-risking agriculture as well and making it a much more secure space where we can have a situation where our farmers are guaranteed their livelihoods. So Vera, in very brief, that's some of the things that we are doing towards ensuring that our country becomes both food and nutrition secure as we move towards the deadline that we've set for ourselves.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Technology, research, climate change as a challenge, but you have the solutions, and clearly the private sector with new financing mechanisms. My second question, the UN Food Systems Summit is an important opportunity to address multiple challenges across all 17 SDGs. What priorities would you be taking to the UN Food Systems Summit in New York in the next 2 weeks?
I think the biggest thing we have, and one of the outcomes some of us are looking for from this current summit, is that we will be able to work together as Africa and to come up with common positions that we will be able to table at the UN Food Systems Summit that is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And I believe that if we are able to do that, we can probably work together to identify game-changing solutions to some of the challenges that we have in this sector, and also hopefully a series of national dialogues that will help us achieve and widen our food production systems, make available more digital agricultural solutions, and also how we can further push the digital agriculture through things like e-voucher programs, advisory services, market information systems, weather information systems, the development of commodity exchange across our continent, and also what I referred to earlier, which is the revitalization of our 4K clubs, which is a means of getting our young people to understand the value, the nobility, as I said earlier, of agriculture, but also the profitability of agriculture and the fact that it is in itself not only just a noble career, but a career in which you can make a very good livelihood for yourself through the use of technology and so on and so forth. I'm also very keen on the school feeding program that I said, and I hope that we can achieve some mileage in terms of ensuring that all our school-going children are able to do so on a full belly. That is critical, that is important, and I would like and really hope that we would be able to make some very, very good headway in that particular direction to ensure that we have access to nutritious food for our school children in their school days. I think finally is the issue of climate change, which is always around us, and its impact on our food systems, and how, again, we can work together as Africa, together with our international partners, to see how we can overcome the challenges of climate change and the effects of climate change, especially for those of us who are the least contributors, but the most affected. This is another area where I really hope that at the UN Summit, we will be able to make some progress towards supporting our farmers in this critical area. So those, again, are some of the areas. Also, of course, is how we will all recover out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as I have said, has hit us all very hard, and how we will be able to work together, partner together, to ensure that we are able to build back better post-COVID, and to ensure that the gains of the past are retained and greater headway even made based on the experiences that we have all had during this very unfortunate period of COVID.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think a lot of lessons there for many African countries to come and build on, particularly on technology and research. Climate change, particularly locusts, has affected East Africa and stunted our growth. So we do see the need for additional SDRs, I have to say this, as we get into the Food System Summit and ask for additional resources. Somebody who has been a constant advocate for food systems, who has demonstrated it in his own country, who has been an advocate in general for Africa coming together as one to speak in one voice for Africa's food systems, Africa's infrastructure, in fact, for Africa's independence, is the president of Rwanda, Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. My first question to you, as chair of AUDA NEPAD, how can food systems transformation contribute to building forward better from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and help us build momentum to achieve the SDGs by 2030?
Thank you, Vera. Excellencies, heads of state and government, former heads of state, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the UN Deputy UN Secretary General Amina Mohammed. First, I want to thank President Kenyatta for hosting the AGRF Summit and to acknowledge the hard work of Dr. Kalibata and her team and the leadership of His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn as the chair of the AGRF Partners Group. Now to your question, food systems are key to achieving the SDGs, first of all. 70% of African adults work in agriculture, and agribusiness. If they aren't doing well, then Africa isn't doing well. More than 35% of the world's hungry are in Africa. Clearly, we need a transformation in how our food systems are organized. We must also ensure that everyone has access to the food they need on an equitable and affordable basis. For Africa, this means importing less food because we are capable of growing more of what we consume here on our continent. We must take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area to trade the produce with one another. That is a big business opportunity for all of us. We also need to be frank that a fairer global trade regime for food products is necessary. There needs to be a level playing field. Food systems contribute around 1/3 of global carbon emissions. But the effects of climate change on rainfall patterns and desertification in Africa are already being felt. For Africa, the stakes are very high when it comes to climate change. Our continent's voice should be clearly heard at COP26 in November and beyond. The United Nations Food Systems Summit later this month is an opportunity to commit to the actions necessary to transform food systems in line with the SDGs. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, has facilitated an African common position in advance of the summit in line with Agenda 2063. Africa's solutions will be pursued in 5 tracks. 1, nutrition and school feeding. 2, supporting local markets and supply chains and trade within Africa. 3, increase financing for agriculture to 10% of public expenditure. 4, help smallholder farmers, especially women. And 5, expand social safety nets and climate early warning data systems. But we must bear in mind that success comes down to implementing these bold ideas, not just discussing them. We cannot afford business as usual when it comes to food systems and the livelihoods that depend on food production. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you productive deliberations throughout this summit. So waiting for your second question, Vera, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. My second question will be around what you're planning to take to New York, but since you have answered some of that already, I'm going to push a little bit and ask you now about the financing. You talked about it as agriculture as a business. Agriculture is our largest private sector segment on the continent. You talked about it in supply chains. You talked about it on the AFCFTA. You talked about it in smallholder farmers. How do you think we can use the summit in New York to ensure that Africa gets the financing it needs to boost our private sector? We have seen Rwanda at the forefront of getting the private sector together to get the COVID-19 vaccines. What challenges do we need to lift and take away in New York so we can get that financing, both for COVID, I go back to it, but also for our food systems? Thank you, Mr. President.
I think financing part of the whole issue has been discussed in many ways, from the G20 summits, from G20 compact with Africa to the institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, different partner countries. We have been talking about the financing of the different efforts we have to undertake to have all these things brought together. In fact, that's how also we have arrived at, even if it is not enough, having the SDRs issue addressed, much as we are still saying it is not enough for Africa. It is enough, generally $650 billion, and part of that for Africa, 33 billion. We could still find other formulas to have more of that. And I think those discussions have been going on. So around the Food Systems Summit later this month, all we can do is bring all the information together, all the efforts that have been underway to better understanding and how to practically tap into the different resources. But all that depends on the political will, not only of some of those who hold the key to making those resources available, but also those in need, those of us in need, making the right demands and actually showing what it means to the benefit of all of us. So I think we just need, we've been talking, we've been discussing, we have information, we have everything before us. I think what we need to do now is to come up with concrete action and results that will allow us to continue moving forward the way we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A call for a practical approach, political will to those we will be talking to when we get to New York for the Food Systems Summit, and in particular making the right demands, particularly as you so eloquently combined the challenge on climate change and food security as one of the biggest challenges that Africa has as it tries to get to 2030. Thank you again, Your Excellency. I will now ask two questions to Your Excellency, President Lazarus Chakwera, the President of Malawi. Your Excellency, what have you learned from hosting the Food Systems Dialogue? And what are you planning to do differently to ensure that your country is on track to end hunger by 2030?
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government and former heads of state and government, and Deputy Secretary General of the UN. Let me, first of all, state that we have learned that food is a complex issue. It touches every aspect of human existence, from socioeconomics to culture. And as such, it requires collaborative and multi-stakeholder approach to ensure quality delivery. And in that matrix, the voice of the smallholder farmer must loom large. And secondly, we have learned that our food systems have key gaps and challenges that need to be addressed urgently to achieve the SDGs by 2030. And some of the examples: limited resilience to natural shocks, poor transport, processing and storage infrastructure, systemic market failures, increased energy demand vis-a-vis population growth, inadequate dietary diversification, and low productivity and production of nutritious food. And so in tackling these challenges, we are truly following new pathways in order that we might develop several homegrown solutions that incorporate the vast experience of our people, some of which are the following. We are now shifting gears away from dependence on the handhold farming and from dependence on maize for food. We now have a presidential delivery unit, PDU, in my office to push on all levers of the government system to deliver food security, which is one of the 3 key deliverables of our development agenda for Malawi. We now have a prioritization method for the country's key food systems, 2 to 3 of which are earmarked for short-term action over the next 2-3 years, so that those challenges can be adequately addressed. We are designing a long-term governance coordination and delivery platform to deliver food systems transformation towards the 2030 agenda. And we are reviewing our regulatory framework for land use to ensure that our laws support the effective use of our arable land through mechanization and irrigation farming and from climate change. We are turning our focus to the production of locally affordable food that enhance diversity. And we are conscientizing the whole nation to new forms and values aimed at reducing cultural practices that lead to food wastage and pollution. We have embarked on an ambitious logistical and technological infrastructure development program to create the needed hardware and software for a robust food system. So we are actually supporting households exposed to shocks, such as COVID-19 and floods, with surplus food that we realize from our affordable inputs program that has bolstered our food system with greater capacity for food production. So our expectation is that these new pathways will be benchmarked by policy coherence within our own Malawi 2063 vision. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Again, coming back to the right policy environment. And of course, one of those is making sure that women have access to land. We have been working very closely with your government on that and with all the other governments, and clearly it is one way of solving and beginning to answer some of the food systems problems. Question number 2, the UN Food Systems Summit is an important opportunity to address multiple challenges across all the 17 SDGs. What priorities will you be taking to the UN Food Systems Summit in New York in 2 weeks' time?
And so, as I have stated already, what we are really wanting to bring to New York is our resolve to shift gears so that we're able to have the needed support in terms of agricultural production, so that we can mechanize and we can also commercialize, and in terms of making sure that all that we do, whether we are on the ground tilling the fields, that we want to be food secure, and we want to sense that we are a population that is feeding on the right kind of food. Diversified diets are a product of locally made solutions involving the local population, which is the highest population in the rural areas, as well as food suppliers to the urban centers. And we want to be able then to get involved in ambitious technological infrastructure, like we have the Sheer Valley Transformation Project, which will be involved in big production using the waters that we have, because that is a place that is prone to drought. And so we feel that with all of this and with all the support of the region as well as Africa as a whole, and with all of the trading that we're able to do amongst ourselves, we should be able to really be food secure because we have systems that are supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Rwanda, Kenya, and Malawi are all countries that have begun to create food commodity exchanges in the past. We hope that together we can increase on that and ensure that there are better food systems on the continent. Today, Africa is a net importer to the tune of about $81 billion of food. And by 2030, we will be importing about $115 billion. It is not bad per se that we're importing food, but we should not be importing food we can produce. My next question is going to go to Namibia. Your Excellency, President Hage Geingob, good to see you. Hunger has increased across the continent. How will Namibia tackle the issue of hunger? And what have you learned from the food systems thinking that you have led in Namibia recently? How can that help you to change your thinking and processes on the issue?
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Since independence, given our comprehensive social safety net programs, more than 500,000 Namibians have been lifted out of severe poverty. During this administration's first term in office, the food bank program was rolled out across all regions, reaching 42,081 Namibians, while the drought relief program reached over 2.8 million Namibians cumulatively. During this period, no Namibian was reported to have died from hunger, despite the country enduring one of the worst droughts in recent history. According to the October 2020 Socioeconomic Impact Assessment of COVID-19 in Namibia, overall poverty is expected to increase by an estimated 4.2% as a result of loss of income. And convert the food bank and special feeding scheme for marginalized communities into monthly cash transfer as a first step to phase in a conditional basic income grant. It is a call for us to come in with a basic income grant, universal basic income grant. But I'm not agreeing with that because I don't think a person who is a billionaire and a poor person must be given the same amount. So while this call is on, I'm talking about conditional basic income grant. To complement the above social safety net program, Namibia will promote and facilitate the infusion of private strategic investment into the agricultural sector. This ambition will contribute to the national goals of bolstering food security and self-sufficiency. These schemes hold the potential to unlock the production of high-value crops, contribute to the export market demands, while creating thousands of jobs. And thank you for that question.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Using nature-based solutions ensure that we can improve on food systems and tackle hunger. The second question is the same question I've been asking. The UN Food Systems Summit is an important opportunity to address the multiple challenges across all 17 SDGs. What priorities would you be taking to the UN Food Systems Summit in New York in 2 weeks' time that can address this issue, particularly coming from a part of the world where inequality is quite high, and we know that food systems and food availability is one of the issues?
Thank you. Namibia is a small open economy that is susceptible to independent intervening variables, including climate change and its disruptive consequences. Namibia experiences current droughts, of which the most recent have been recorded as the worst in the history. Therefore, Namibia must craft climate change-related solutions as it looks to holistically combat malnutrition and inequality. To do so, Namibia has established a green economic recovery plan, as has been envisioned in June 2021 by African heads of state during the launch of the African Union Continental Green Recovery Action Plan. Our ambitious plans to develop a green and blue economy, as articulated under the economic advancement pillar of our Harambee Prosperity Plan 2, is hinged on our ability to work with global and continental partners to capture our world-class renewable energy resource and utilize it to produce green hydrogen. The emissions-free hydrogen will be converted into ammonia, which is a key building block for various fertilizer products. Locally produced zero-emissions fertilizer can be used to provide a fertile opportunity for local and regional sustainable economic development and will meaningfully contribute to a global effort to decarbonize our economies while augmenting Africa's ambitions to attain zero hunger. This new clean synthetic fuels industry has the potential to double our GDP, create employment for thousands of Namibians, and importantly, contribute to a cleaner and more sustainable home for our children and our children's children. Environment, hunger, and equity are indeed intricately linked and must be tackled concurrently. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for that fantastic answer. Indeed, the Economic Commission for Africa with Oxford University have just finished a series of studies that show that the green recovery stands to provide over somewhere between 420% value added, 320% more jobs in many of African economies as we move towards a just and equitable transition and provide a strengthening of our food systems. I'm moving now to President of Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni. Your Excellency, welcome and good to have you. You personally convened and presided over the National Food Systems Dialogue. Your government identified changes needed in the agriculture sector, but also health, environment, finance, and trade as areas where you can tackle the national food systems. How will you take the momentum from these dialogues and translate them into actions across your government? How can this work help catch up on the SDGs by 2030?
Excellencies, heads of state, and former heads of state, and the Secretary General, Under Secretary General of the UN. I thank His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta for organizing this conference and inviting us. I also thank former Prime Minister Haile Mariam. I don't like to answer this issue just by giving one point. I think the issue of food production, of food systems, is a multidimensional one. And I have listed 15 points here. Number one, improved seeds. Fortunately, in Uganda, we have the research institutions, and they have handled the issue of the improved seeds for many of the crops. Secondly, improved agro practices. The practices which can be done to farm by contours, to dig trenches so that you retain water, and so on. Number three, storage. Storing what you have produced. Number four, post-harvest handling. Good post-harvest handling. Number five, improved agricultural machinery instead of using the hoe, the hand hoe. Number six, transport, the roads, the railway systems. Number seven, irrigation, to make sure that the production is stable. you don't have production this year, and then next year it collapses. Number 8, the issue of markets. Uganda does not have, we don't have a problem of food shortage. We don't import any food. On the contrary, we have got big surpluses of foods, of maize, of bananas, of milk, of beef. So I would like the African continent, and some of the president's excellencies have talked about it, the market, because the farmers will produce more reliably and better if they know that what they produce will get a market. But sometimes, because of the fragmented African markets, some of the food surplus countries sometimes do not easily get markets. Then the use of fertilizers. There is, in the case of Uganda, we have got we use very little fertilizers in spite of producing big quantities. So you can imagine how much more we would produce. Like, for instance, the farmers have been producing 5.3 tons per hectare of bananas in the villages. But in the government center, where we have used irrigation and fertilizers, we are producing 53 tons, 53 point something tons per hectare. So you can see more, almost 10 times when you do the right things. Then the issue of the crop, livestock, diseases, pests, and vermin. The issue of crop, livestock, diseases, pests, and vermin. Then number 11, the issue of soil mapping the soil so that you know which soil is where and what you need to do about it. In the case of Uganda, we have had for some time the issue of land fragmentation on account of inheritance. The traditional inheritance, you find the land was 3 acres. When the elder died, he divided it up. It is now half an acre. Once it is half an acre per homestead, the economics changes. So here we are struggling with that issue of land fragmentation also. Then the problem of overfishing in some of the lakes, like Lake Victoria, overfishing, which damages the fish stocks. But you need energy. If the agricultural sector is growing like it has been in Uganda, you need electricity to be able to process what you are producing. Now, in the case of Uganda, we don't have food shortage, but we have food insecurity in some groups because they don't have income to buy the food, especially the ones in the towns. So this one also ties up with the issue which some of the excellencies were talking about, maybe having to have school feeding paid for by the government, to expand jobs so that everybody gets a job and can be able to buy food for himself, or some other social support actions. So with these efforts, we are sure to have, for us, we have enough food. Uganda has never had shortage of food. On the contrary, we have surplus. But I am sharing this, and we can produce more, but I am sharing all this so that we can see how we can harmonize, have the same thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think you have summarized almost all the points that the different leaders have had in a very detailed and itemized manner. So I will not go and I wouldn't ask you a second question if you permit. But one thing that you brought up was price and inflation pressures because of the food systems and how we can bring that down with school feeding programs. Very important point. I'm going to go now to Tanzania, and I'm going to ask the generic question to Your Excellency. In Tanzania, as Tanzania plans and is preparing for the UN Food Systems Summit, what is Tanzania planning to take to the UN Food System Summit in New York in 2 weeks as your key priorities?
Well, Vera, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I wish first to recognize Their Excellencies, heads of state and government present. Straight to the question, there are a number of priority areas that we wish to indeed take to the summit on the 23rd of September in New York. One, basically along the lines that His Excellency President Museveni just outlined, the issue of how we leverage technology to deal with or be able to leapfrog on areas of low production and productivity, basically in both crop and livestock and fisheries subsectors. And indeed, issues around seed and animal breed, the quality of fingerlings, how we deal with pest management, irrigation infrastructure, and so forth. So that is one. But second, I think it is important that we take to New York the issue of agricultural financing, and particularly given the very high risk of rain-fed agriculture. Of course, our own development banks, like what we have in Tanzania, the Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank is inadequate. We will need also to tap into regional banks, the African Development Bank and the like. But indeed, pushing forward the SDR proposal, I think is key. But another area still on the financing, I think you'll have to really push on financing climate change mitigation and adaptation measures, and including how we safeguard biodiversity. So these, I think, are really critical issues that we need to push in New York. Thank you.